In the dark annals of Nazi Germany, a chapter often overshadowed by the broader Holocaust narrative is the harrowing plight of disabled individuals. Under the guise of racial purity and eugenic ideology, the Nazi regime embarked on a sinister program to eliminate those they deemed unworthy of life. The T4 program, a chilling euphemism for the systematic murder of disabled people, reveals the depths of Nazi brutality beyond the battlefields and concentration camps. Initiated in 1939, this program marked a horrifying chapter where disability equated to a death sentence under Hitler's regime. Thousands of men, women, and children suffering from a range of physical and mental disabilities were forcibly removed from their homes and communities. What followed was a systematic, industrial-scale annihilation carried out in secret killing centers, where victims were subjected to inhumane medical experiments, gassing, and lethal injections. These acts, driven by a twisted ideology that sought to cleanse the Aryan race, represented a grotesque violation of human rights. The T4 program served as a precursor and testing ground for the mass exterminations that would later define the Holocaust. It exposes a lesser-known but equally sinister facet of Nazi tyranny, one that targeted the most vulnerable in society, those who are mentally or physically challenged, often both, people with severe autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, a variety of mental illnesses, and many other disabilities, physical, mental, and emotional, and sometimes all three. In the late 1800s and through the first half of the 20th century, a movement called eugenics gained a surprisingly large number of followers, especially in Germany, Sweden, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and the USA. Eugenics is the idea of trying to improve the human race by controlling who has children. It's like selective breeding for humans, focusing on traits like intelligence, health, or even things like hair color. People who supported eugenic practices also believed it was the role of the government to decide who should or should not have children. In all of those countries we just mentioned, forced sterilization programs were begun. In the USA, a surprisingly large number of African American men in Louisiana and several other states in the Deep South, this was done without the victim knowing, until the sterilization procedure was done, if at all. Most victims were lied to. They were told they needed an operation such as an appendectomy, and many times, not only were they sterilized, but the appendix was needlessly removed as well. In Australia, many indigenous people were given the same treatment. In Sweden, about 30,000 people, whether mentally challenged or even having what the authorities called an antisocial lifestyle, meaning criminals and others who were deemed to be a threat to the social fabric. That is a very broad definition. The Swedish program, by the way, was only ended in 1975. Similar things occurred in Canada, especially among the First Tribes, and in England among the mentally challenged. As you've probably figured out, eugenics, while dressing itself up as a way to improve the human race, was and is subjective. Whoever had the power decides who lives and dies. One day you're supporting the idea, the next you're a target, perhaps because of a family history of epilepsy, alcoholism, or criminality. Not because of anything you've done, but because what you might do in the future, or what your unborn kids might do. Nazi Germany. As you've likely figured out, Hitler and the Nazis embraced the idea of eugenics wholeheartedly. While the eugenics programs of Australia, Canada, and the United States had an element of racism in them, only people on the very extreme right wing mentioned or called for the elimination of what they deemed were inferior races in their countries. Anti-Semitism and other forms of racism ran rampant in post-World War I Germany for many reasons, some old and some new, like the false idea that Germany's Jews betrayed the country at the Paris talks, which ended World War I and created the Versailles Treaty. The ideological roots of the T4 program lay deep within Nazi ideology. The twisted concept of Lebensraum, or living space, envisioned a German utopia populated by a pure Aryan race. Those deemed lebenswertes Leben, unworthy of life, were seen as a drain on resources and a stain on the national fabric. This category encompassed individuals with physical and mental disabilities, the chronically ill, the elderly, and those deemed asocial. Fueled by a warped understanding of eugenics and a thirst for racial purity, the Nazis saw eliminating these groups as a twisted form of social engineering. Doctors, seduced by the allure of scientific progress, became willing executioners, wielding their stethoscopes as weapons of selection. The machinery of death. In September 1939, Hitler's secret decree authorized a T4 program, granting his physician, Karl Brandt, and Chancellery-Chief Philipp Buhler the chilling power to carry out mercy killings. A bureaucratic apparatus emerged, identifying and selecting victims through a network of physicians and administrators. Camouflaged as sanatoriums, killing centers like Hadamar, Hartheim, and Sonnenstein became instruments of mass murder. Lethal injections, gas chambers disguised as showers, and starvation all became tools in the grim trade of death. Families were deceived with euphemisms like transfer, masking the irreversible journey their loved ones were taking. The T4 program, however, was not shrouded in complete secrecy. Whispers of disappearances and hushed accounts of brutality began to seep out, stirring public unease. Sermons by courageous figures like Bishop Clemens August Graf von Galen challenged the program's legitimacy, raising concerns about its barbarity and ethical bankruptcy. It's important to remember that, at least in most cases, and definitely in the case of the Nazis, dictatorships can be exceedingly popular. Most of the time, nations fall into dictatorships when the previous years have been economically, socially, and politically harmful. Suppose you're a supporter of a dictatorship. In that case, life can be good. Still, once the dictator or the government is in power for a time, it's often the case that it begins seeing enemies everywhere, or enacting policies that former supporters don't like. And that's when a dictatorship becomes dangerous, when its former followers become enemies. It happens every time. In 1939, Nazi Germany unleashed a horror, not just upon Poland, but within its borders. The Aktion T4 program, cloaked in the deceptive guise of mercy killing, embarked on a systematic campaign to eliminate individuals deemed unworthy of life. This article delves into the chilling history of the T4 program, its insidious connection to the horrors of the Holocaust, and the enduring lessons it leaves behind. Protests by families and concerned citizens also played a crucial role in raising awareness and pressuring the regime. One notable example was the case of Gerhard Schneider, a young boy with Down syndrome whose mother, Emma, refused to sign the consent form for his transfer. Her public campaign garnered widespread support and ultimately helped force the program's official halt. From hospitals to extermination camps. Facing mounting pressure and fearing international scrutiny, Hitler officially halted the T4 program in August 1941. However, the machinery of death did not grind to a complete halt. Killings continued in a more decentralized manner, with the program's methods and personnel finding their way into the concentration camps that would become synonymous with the Holocaust. Personnel trained in the T4 killing centers, like physicians and administrators, were transferred to extermination camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Majdanek. One of the most infamous of the men who worked in the T4 program was Franz Stangl, who later became one of the commandants of the Treblinka death camp, where an estimated 800 to 900,000 people were killed. The gassing techniques perfected in killing centers like Sonnenstein were adapted and scaled up in the Nazi death camps. The dehumanization and bureaucratic process honed in the T4 program became blueprints for the industrial destruction of the Holocaust. The T4 program stands as a grim prelude to the industrial destruction of the Holocaust. It served as a testing ground for Nazi ideology, desensitizing society to violence and normalizing the dehumanization of targeted groups. The techniques honed in the killing centers, selection, deception, and mass murder would horrifyingly spread during the Holocaust, with Jews, Roma, and other undesirables replacing the victims of the T4 program. The impact of the T4 program cannot be quantified by the estimated 300,000 lives it claimed. It shattered families, leaving behind a legacy of grief and trauma that continues to reverberate through generations. Many survivors of the program, like Richard Kautz, who was deemed incurably lazy as a child, faced lifelong stigma and struggled to come to terms with their harrowing experiences. The program also inflicted lasting scars on the medical profession. The collaboration of doctors in the T4 program eroded trust in the medical establishment and raised serious ethical questions about potential misuse of medical knowledge and authority. The T4 program serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked prejudice, the slippery slope of dehumanization, like calling people vermin, and the consequences of allowing science and medicine to be corrupted by ideology. This is History on Fleek. See you next time.